Hi, it's Adam with WebStarts, and today I want to talk about a topic that's been in the news a lot lately, and you may have heard of it or may not, but I want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin and give you 5 reasons that I believe in the future of the Bitcoin personally. Now, you can agree or disagree with this, but these are the 5 reasons why I think Bitcoin is more or less here to stay. The first reason is that the world is catching on to the fiat currency scam. Central banks are printing money and they're counterfeiting your money and basically stealing that out of your bank account. And you can do all kinds of research online to see that or to learn more about that, I guess you could say. When you earn, let's say, $1 and then the government turns around and creates $5, your dollar becomes worth 1/5 when you exchange it for goods or services of what it used to be. And inflation is out of control, and you can look up online, there's all kinds of charts that will show you how dramatic we've changed our economic system by creating a massive supply of money and what that's done to prices. It's created tremendous inflation. Bitcoin ultimately, I believe, creates a level playing field where the central banks are not in control, and it basically creates equality or brings equality to the marketplace. And although it's been a painstaking struggle every step of the way for mankind, we've always moved closer to the ideology of equality. In other words, that every human being is valuable or important and should have freedom and rights and things like that. We've always moved closer to that, even though sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I think that'll be the case with the money too, but I think ultimately the idea of equality always wins out. The second thing that I want to talk about is that the fact that even though we want that equality and we want to be treated fairly and honestly and justly, we don't want to give up our conveniences for that. And a lot of times that shows up in society. For example, we want the convenience of flying on an airplane, and even though it might not be right for us to wait in a long line to go through a significant security check, we're willing to do it because we still want to have the convenience of flying. And so I believe we're going to continue to want the convenience of transferring money instantly and participating in a global economy, and Bitcoin enables that like no money in history because it's an entirely electronic currency. It's what's called a cryptocurrency, and what it does is it removes that friction of when you transfer money. Well, when you transfer money now, it goes through a central bank, and then basically there's a lot of people with their hands in the pot, and that creates an inefficiency. With Bitcoin, you can transfer it electronically from person to person, and there's very little friction. The third point of why I believe in Bitcoin is supply and demand. Whether we like it or not, there's certain principles that exist in this world, and we're bound to those principles. Kind of like gravity, we're attached to we prevent ourselves from floating away because of gravity. I believe it's no different with the principle of supply and demand. Current monetary systems attempt to elude the principles of supply and demand by creating inflation. They basically just print more money, creating an abundant supply of money and devaluing the things that you hold on to. And this all ends up in what we call bubbles, and people throw around the term bubbles a lot, but let me explain exactly what a bubble is, or help give you some insight into a bubble. When we create that inflation or we counterfeit the money, it brings that new money into the marketplace, and then what we do is we push this inflation from one sector of our economic market to another. So let me give you an example. In the early 2000s, we had a stock bubble, so all the inflation was pushed into the stock market. By the mid-2000s, we pushed that bubble on over to the housing market. At the end of the housing market, when that bubble burst, we pushed that bubble into energy and natural gas and the gas prices and things like that. The reason why bubbles occur and why they get pushed from market to market is nobody wants to be the person who's stiffed with the counterfeit money, meaning they're the ones who are stuck with the printed money at the end of the day. Ultimately, however, the general public does absorb this counterfeit money by working longer hours, working harder, and having to work more efficiently for the same amount of goods and services. So the work that we put in a day actually increases, and we're able to get less for that work. And that's basically where the shortfall ultimately ends up being made up. And fourth thing is lower transaction fees. Bitcoin, because again, it doesn't involve a central bank, there's essentially nobody with their hands in the pot, and with no other banks or entities with their hand in the pot, you can transfer money from one person to another person securely, and there's essentially no transaction fees. Right now, I believe the transaction fees for transferring, I saw an article recently where someone transferred like $6 million worth of Bitcoin, and the transaction fee was like $1. If they were to do that over a wire transfer, it'd be something like $140,000 or whatever. But basically, because no banks have their hands in the pot, you can transfer money electronically from person to person with no fees. The fifth reason why I believe in Bitcoin is universal acceptance. We're at an economic time where technology and the internet has really shrunk the size of our world, and the average person is more open to doing business on a global basis than they ever have before. Eventually, I think we will be in a global economy full on, and I think we're making that transition right now, and I think some people would argue we're already in a full-on global economy. But one of the ways that we can make that economy, that global economy, more efficient is by not having to convert our money into a local currency. And Bitcoin, if we all agree on the value of a Bitcoin and it becomes a stable supply of money, ultimately that will be an easy way to exchange money for goods or services on an international basis without that inefficiency of converting to a local currency. So those are the 5 reasons. Now, those are 5 reasons why I believe in the Bitcoin. There's plenty of pundits out there that don't believe in the Bitcoin, and I don't entirely disagree with their logic. There are still some question marks. If there weren't some question marks, then me and everybody else would probably be dumping everything they had into Bitcoin. Some of the question marks that are going to come up are going to be things like transactions are irreversible. I don't know that the general public's going to embrace that, but I believe that there are services that can solve that, like escrow services, for example, are a good way to deal with that problem. And I think that there'll be new businesses that pop up to deal with that problem. Another challenge for Bitcoin is its lack of intrinsic value, and you'll hear a lot about that, but our current money doesn't really have intrinsic value either. But what it kind of lends itself to is a stable price in a market, and I think that that's way more important. So if we can get Bitcoin to stop being so volatile and be worth a steady amount, I think a lot more people would be quicker to adopt it. And I do think that'll happen with time, but for the moment, there's a lot of volatility in the price of a Bitcoin, and that doesn't make it a reliable source of cash on hand. So anyway, whether you agree, disagree, or you have more thoughts, feel free to leave comments in the section below. And don't forget to visit my site, webstarts.com, to build your very own free website or your own online store. And keep your eye out for Bitcoin integration, because we have that in mind and we hope to bring that to you soon.